Well, welcome to this week's episode of The Dental Guys. I'm Wes, the Dental Guy.
And I'm John, the Dental Guy. And, you know, Wes, before we talk about the actual show, I just need to settle something, because those of you who've been listening to us for a long time, or maybe from the beginning, you know that we have a few passions, right? Wes has his passion in his hand. You see, I have this mug. We both have coffee happening a lot in our world. And, you know, Wes and I both have had a coffee problem, I would call it. It's a blessing, you could call it, kind of like, is OCD a blessing or a curse, or is coffee addiction a blessing or a curse? But since we've known each other, we've always been comparing notes on coffee, just like dentistry. And I'm at a point where I'm ready. I think I'm ready. Now I'll tell you in a year whether I was wrong or right, but I think I'm ready to dive into espresso. Now, those of you who have done a little bit of diving into espresso, you know this is no joke. This is no joke. There's a whole other world here. You know, just because you got your little pour over going, that's so easy, and it's still hard, but it's so easy to figure out. It's relatively inexpensive to get into. But I'm at this crossroads, Wes, where I've got to figure out what machine to buy. And I haven't made final decisions yet. We're looking at the position in the kitchen and where it's going to go and all these things with water and plumbing and all this stuff. But there's two machines I've looked at, and I know this is going to sound like a coffee review, but bear with us. Bear with us. Or you can fast forward if you hate coffee. If you hate it, I guess you can fast forward to it. But
yeah, I don't know why you would.
Looking at, I know, why would you? You're crazy. But I'm looking at the old standard of La Marzocco, which is one of the most revered brands in the world, straight out of Italy, the Linea Mini, which is for most considered to be one of the finest semi-manual, I guess that's the best way of putting it, ways of making espresso. Still looks the part as what you would expect to find in a high-end shop, but it still involves you having to turn the knobs and the gears and set the times and pay attention. It's got some newer features. It's Wi-Fi enabled now, so there's a little bit of fanciness. But there's also these new players on the market, Wes, that are like using technology and basically touchscreen craziness, pre-made profiles, ways of controlling temperature and pressure and time, all these factors. And one of those companies that's come about is Decent. They're not a sponsor, okay? This is literally us just talking about this. Decent Espresso. And they're very interesting because they're basically direct to consumer. They're a smaller company. They started as, I think, just a Kickstarter. And now they've got a very well reviewed and revered machine that has got some really interesting features where you can literally call up pre-made profiles or create your own profile. So, Wes, I know that you have done some digging on this. We haven't even talked about this. It's just came up right before the show. Tell me your thoughts on this, Wes.
Yeah, I'm going to give you the 1 minute short on this. Okay?
Yeah, give me your short version.
I cannot express the
espresso or
express the espresso.
Love it.
So, you know, making espresso is, you know, John, it's more than just waking up in the morning and doing a pour over. You got to wait for the machine to heat up. You have to be prepared to be able to use more appropriate waters. There's so many things that we can go down here. The reason why John and I are passionate about espresso is because it's chemistry, man. And both of us were chemistry majors, and it really does hit home with like some super cool things that both he and I really like. The problem with the market right now is, you know, there's the old school, there's the new school, and then there's like the outliers that are just like trying to break through and create a community. And that's what it's about. Like, it's like, where is the community at? And you know, I'm a little concerned about La Marzocco because they were purchased by DeLonghi Group in 2023, a 41% stakeholder now. DeLonghi is not known, quote, for, you know, high quality home machines, but they do have some commercial machines that I guess would be okay. So I'm a little concerned about why that happened, because you have like this old company, this Italian, like,
The Ferrari
yeah, it's like the
feel, right?
Ferrari feel,
Are we getting, did Ferrari get bought by,
Yeah.
I don't know, like Hyundai?
So
I
I am concerned
that's
about
the
that.
question.
I am concerned about that. I'm not saying things will change, because obviously they haven't. It's still a very good machine. The Mini is amazing. It is built like a tank. It is a commercial grade machine. All of these machines that Jon is looking at is certified to work in a commercial environment. And you might be thinking, like, what are we talking about here? We're talking about spending like probably $7,000 to $10,000 by the time you get all your setup. Okay.
Could be.
And you're like, well, you could spend less than that. Absolutely. We could go crazy with lever machines and all this kind of thing. The thing that the decent that's interesting is because, like, how many times has this been in my shopping cart and I just haven't pushed the button? And then recently, I've been waiting. They came out with a new design, and it's getting ready. Pre-orders are going out, and I really think this could be the machine that I buy, because I like to tinker. I like to tinker, but I also like to wake up in the morning and like to hit a button. And the thing about the decent is that the community is so strong that I could order some coffee that somebody suggested on the community. They've already dialed it in. Basically load that profile into this tablet, grind it to the settings on the machine, on the grinder that is suggested by Decent and the community, and hit go. And I'm going to get the same tasting profiles, and I'm not going to have to dink around too much with all the profiles. Now, if I want to play chemist on Saturday morning, and go crazy, I can.
This is what I would equate right now. Again, these are nerd things we're talking about here.
Yeah.
But I would equate it to what's happened in recording of guitars, okay? Because I'm a guitar guy. So it's either, do you buy the all-tube Vox AC30 and crank it to 11 and record that classic sound, or the Matchless, or whatever, your Marshall, whatever you like, the Fender Twin, whatever. Or do you get an amp modeler that is software-based, that you tell the difference on a recording? Or how much does the feel matter? How much does the physical buttons and the touch and the aesthetic versus looking at a touch screen? So if you have opinions on coffee or guitars, please text us at 865-544-8954. We would love to hear your opinions, because literally I am analysis paralysis on this thing, Wes.
Oh,
but you know what else? As we're talking today about this, this really is a segue, because Wes.
Well, before we get to that, Jon.
Yeah.
This show is brought to you by, first of all, an old sponsor but a goodie, the Restorative Driven Implants. Jon and I are founders of the Restorative Driven Implants, and let me tell you, we can't forget our sponsors, because, look, they make this show possible. We would not recommend something that we don't use. I mean, for goodness sakes, we started Restorative Driven Implants years ago and helped write the curriculum for Restorative Driven Implants. So if you want to come here, I still speak at Restorative Driven Implants and talk there. And a couple times a year, I'm traveling and speaking for Restorative Driven Implants. And hey, we really endorse Restorative Driven Implants and appreciate their sponsor of the show. If you want to go to a US-based, surgical-based implant, 60 hours plus CE, online and in person, it's incredible. The reviews are outstanding.
It's real world, Wes. I'll just say it's real world. And that's the thing I'll just say briefly is, most implant courses you go to, if you're interested in learning how to place implants, you're going to be part of placing a full arch of implants on someone. They're going to be edentulated. You're going to place a full arch. You're going to be one of 6 of those implants, or maybe all 6. It does not replicate the real world whatsoever. There's very little treatment planning. There's no follow-up. You have no idea what happens to these people. They might be in a foreign country. There's no guides made ahead of time. The CT is taken the same day or 2 days before. This is where, yes, you did put an implant in. Okay, you did. But is this what you're going to do in your practice? If you're wanting a course that is actually going to emulate what types of cases you would do in your practice, and if you want to go to the more advanced, you can. This is the type of curriculum that's made for you. And it's based on research. It's not based on just putting something into bone. It's actually going to teach you principles that are based in research and science. And as a dental guys, we would not endorse that unless we actually had seen the result and knew what it came from. So go check them out, restorative-driven-implants.com. We always will have a soft spot in our heart for what they are doing, and they're doing it right. And also, while we're on the topic of sponsors, the Dental Crafters Network, talk about the OG West. This is the OG sponsor of the Dental Guys. Unlock the potential of one relationship with the Dental Crafters Network, where possibilities are truly infinite. As a family-owned, full-service dental laboratory, they collaborate closely with dentists to understand and meet their unique needs in today's ever-changing dental industry. Choose Dental Crafters Network, where your vision meets innovation. Visit dentalcrafters.net or call 1-800-472-8302. And don't forget to mention the Dental Guys, because remember, if you mention the Dental Guys, when you call, they will give you 10% off of your first case. So make sure there's lots of gold, right, involved in that, because that could be a great deal for you.
Great,
so
man. Still do occasional gold crown, John. I still do occasional gold crowns. Oh. Yeah. So
that number 15 is just asking for it.
It is asking for it. Hey, today on the show, John, are we really stuck in analysis paralysis over our coffee machines? Or are we also stuck in analysis paralysis over whether we should total etch dentin and enamel, or should we selective etch, only etch enamel? And
or should we self-etch?
Or should we just self-etching, use self-etching, use these whatever generation, that we've got, this new old wine and new bottles stuff that we talk about all the time. There's been some confusion. There's been a mic dropped, per se, in one of probably the best journal out there is the Compendium, right? Which happens to be edited by one of our favorite people that's been on the show when it comes to bonding, is Marcus Blotz. And he has co-authored this article in Compendium in this last quarter about some things going on, that they're making some statements that I don't know if I agree with, but I've had personal dentists reach out to me that have been in practice 10 to 20 years that still are confused about what we should be doing when it comes to bonding and preparation of the tooth. I mean, dental students, are you listening to this? Are you confused? I mean, practitioners, whether you are 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years in practice, what are you doing? And why are you doing it? And are we just listening to reps? Are we just listening to non-peer-reviewed journals? Are we listening to people that are making statements and really not understand why they're making the statements that they're making? Now, that's the show today. Is it analysis paralysis, John, that's affecting us in a big way right here? Tell us what we're talking about.
Well, I'll start by saying that I've told this story maybe once before on the show years ago, but I will never forget being at an event years ago when I was probably 2 years or 3 years out at an event, and there was this rep from a very well-renowned bonding company who was marketing his product. He was marketing a good bonding system, and he had about 25 dentists in a room, and he made a big mistake, but he didn't know that he was about to make this mistake. He thought that the people in the room, the dental professionals, the doctors, would know so much more about bonding. So he went around the room. He said, okay, before I talk to you about how good this product is, I want to know what you're currently using and why. And so he said, I just want to go around the room and I want everybody to tell me what product they're using kind of how it works and why you like it or why you don't like it. And basically, why are you using it? And what he thought would be, he was new, obviously, to the dental profession because he didn't know how bad this would be. And as he started going around the room, there were about 3 or 4 out of the 25 or so that actually knew even just the name of the product they were using and something about why. And there were answers such as, whatever my assistant hands me, I think it's this, like, I don't know, this brand or this material, and we'd use it for 10 or 15 seconds, or I'm not really sure. I mean, it became painful. I watched him go from thinking he was going to allow the doctors to show what they knew, and then he could then tell them why they should change, to embarrassing people in a group setting where they didn't even know what they were using. And I remember thinking, okay, this changed my whole outlook. This is the first time after dental school that I think I'd been in a group that big who was actually challenged to tell us why they were using what they were using. These were people that had practiced a lot longer than me. And so I came away with this idea that, okay, we need to know, like, why do people not know? And so back to what you asked, Wes, what are we talking about? Well, we're talking about something that goes back to everyone's learned this in dental school. Everyone currently listening to this learned this in dental school. There was a time where maybe you didn't, right? If you graduated a long time ago, before really composite was a thing. But no one has that excuse anymore. Pretty much everyone listening to this will have learned about the generations of bonding agents. And if you remember any of it, you'll remember that we went from materials that were multiple steps, multiple steps, to trying to see which steps could we remove to simplify, but still not lose bonding strength, and also to try to minimize sensitivity. So we went from the old school 4th generation, which we had a separate etch, a separate prime, a separate bond. Each thing applied completely differently, to 5th generation where we were total etching and then had our prime and bond in one bottle. To 6th generation where we had 2 bottle self etch. 7th generation, single bottle self etch. And the question was, what should we do with these? Which should we use? And then also the question was, what do we do with this etch? And back a few years ago, there started to be some questions about whether or not the total etch was required and whether it had some negative consequences. So let's fast forward to this article first. Let's start with the compendium article. And Wes, Blotz says, Marcus Blotz and Mark Koop were the ones that published this. And just to cut to the chase here, because you should read the article and the recommendations, they say the scientific evidence, the current scientific evidence suggests a selective enamel etch technique when preparing for adhesive dentistry, because we all know why. We all know why etching is good for enamel, right? I shouldn't have to talk about that. But the etching of dentin, they say, with phosphoric acid is discouraged because of the need for complete smear layer removal and its associated postoperative sensitivity, and most importantly, the potential for MMP activation within the collagen. What's MMP? Matrix metalloproteinases. We talked about this years ago, but this is coming back. So now he says the combination of mild universal adhesives with a selective enamel etch technique should be considered. So basically what Blotz is saying in this article, Blotz and Koop, they're saying that etching dentin with phosphoric has some negative consequences because there's a potential for sensitivity and there's a potential of the activation of these enzymes. And so Wes and I kind of stop in our tracks because I feel like these questions keep coming up because people are out there advocating both the single bottle, just don't even etch at all, just rub the single bottle stuff on there. And we've talked about this with Harold Hyman. We know that doesn't work as well as we wish it did. But then there's a question of what do you etch, what do you not? And Wes, I want to turn it back to you. I want you to talk about another giant in the field that you had interaction with out at Spear Education, who you asked this same question to. So I want to hear the other perspective that you heard and kind of how you interpreted that, and then comparing that to what we're reading in this article.
Basically, if you're listening on the YouTubes, and you see the patch, the Sour Patch
Oh man,
Kids
I can
on the
almost
screen.
taste it.
You can almost taste them. You know, I pulled
I
these out of my.
I have a problem with Sour Patch Kids.
You know,
My kids get it for me every birthday because they know it's my favorite.
Yeah, it's Father's Day weekend, John. You know, there's going to be some Sour Patch Kids. This one happens to be a 4th of July special. You know, why am I mentioning the Sour Patch Kids? Well, this is acid. Citric acid is what gives us this wonderful feeling in our mouth whenever we eat the
Flavor
Sour
country,
Patch
we
Kids.
call it. Flavor country.
Flavor country. Flavor town.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
And, you know, is phosphoric acid etch sour to the tooth? I mean, that's what we're asking here. And I think the question that I posed to Jason Smithson at Spear Education when I was taking the bonding course out there, and listen, Nate, hey, if you, hands down, is one of the best clinicians to learn from is Jason Smithson. Whether you take it at Spear or John and I've taken it from an AGD meeting, we've ran into him over the years. You've probably heard about him on other podcasts, but Jason is practical. Just like a lot of Spear doctors are, you don't just go there to learn full arch rehab. You're learning practical applications of how to do things. And what I like about Jason is that he uses evidence, but he also uses practical clinical, like how things work in people's hands and different people's hands, and takes a systemized approach, and then takes years of evidence to build a decision-making process, and then applies that to a skill set that maybe each clinician can repeat in their office. And so, being that he is so astute and understanding, and how he has so many fingers over the years in different companies' back doors, so he's been to the scientists behind these products. He's been a key opinion leader in many of the companies that we talk about. He's asked the tough questions, and I feel like that he really isn't a shrill for this. And I'm not saying Marcus is a shrill at all, because we respect Marcus, and we want Marcus to come on the show and talk about these things, and stay tuned for that one. Okay? All right?
Yep.
But I asked Jason, I said, Jason, I got to ask, because everybody's thinking the same question. Do you believe that we need to selective etch, which means only etch the enamel with phosphoric acid etch, or do you recommend that we total etch? And he said, I total etch everything. I've total etched for years, and I don't seem to have a problem. He said, now, if the prep is super deep, I may not etch the deepest part of the dentin, but I don't have significant issues, in other words, with the total etch technique, as long as you're using your bonding agent correctly. And he specified the type of bonding agents, which, you know, we've talked about on the show, where you need to be scrubbing the dentin for appropriate amount of time based on the manufacturer's recommendation, not just some reps recommendations. And most of the time we should be double scrubbing. He recommended that, and air thinning in between our scrubs. Now,
well, so I want to hear, though, because when I hear what he said, the reason why I think, and I want you to kind of back this up if this is what you took from it, the reason he's saying total etch is that he's not seeing problems with total etch in terms of post-op sensitivity. We already know that total etch creates a good bond, right? That's not in question here. We know that total etch creates a good bond. But did you take from this, Wes, that he said the problem that people encounter with total etching dentin is the post-op potential? for post-op sensitivity? Is that kind of what you got as to why he was saying like people might avoid it? Because I want to dive into this a little bit, because there's two things Blotz brings up, right? One is the potential for post-op sensitivity because you're removing the smear layer.
Yes.
The other is a much more geeky thing to talk about, which is these MMP enzymes, right? But let's just talk about post-op sensitivity for a minute, Wes.
It's multifactorial,
Is Jason
John.
Smithson essentially saying that, hey, I'm not having a problem with total etching dentin as far as sensitivity because I'm just following the directions
That's
on
right.
how to actually do total etch?
So he went a little bit further in his lecture talking about managing post-operative sensitivity. Okay, so there's some layered things here that need to be done to manage post-operative sensitivity. Why are you going to have post-operative sensitivity? He said. Well, number one is that you have contamination of saliva. You've not done proper isolation. And so what they've shown with composite bonding or resin bonding, any indirect or direct bonded restoration, if there's contamination, and don't say you're isolating excellent, because unless you're using rubber dam or isovac, and unless you're like a genius with cotton rolls, and doing very simple occlusal restorations, it is almost impossible to isolate appropriately and not have contamination. You can't work faster than biology, people. You can't work faster than what's down at the base of your prep. We all know that what Jason's saying is that one of the main reasons people have post-operative sensitivity is because we don't isolate properly. Number two, he said, we're not cleaning properly. And so one of the things that he showed is that if we're going to be doing bonding to a substrate, enamel and dentin, we need to properly prepare the enamel and dentin. Now, preparation does not stop with a diamond burr. Okay, that's where it starts. Okay, we clean and remove the decay. Once the decay is removed, then we use some type of cleaning agent. Some of you think that you can see protein for some reason. I used to think that. I used to think that you could see that it was clean until I started doing staining of enamel and proved to myself that what I was missing was the protein pellicle. And so now, Jason, what he's saying is that there's enough literature to say that we should be cleaning our preps and our teeth that we're bonding to with some type of pumice, which we've heard Bob Winter and Greg Kinzer talk about, prior to bonding, or we should be using some type of aluminum oxide air abrasion technique or some type of, intraoral abrasion. Not only does that decrease postoperative sensitivity, but the literature says that it increases the dental adhesive properties and it also increases significantly the enamel adhesive properties. And then the proper finishing of the margins with fine diamond to create a better seal. So these are layered things. So if you're saying, I don't want to do all that, well, then that's okay.
Well, but I want to talk about, though, even before people like Smithson talked about preparing things differently.
Yeah.
Just the chemistry itself, right? We all learned that when you total etch dentin, and then there's this critical step of drying.
Well, are you
there's
desiccating?
This critical step. Well, right, because there's this critical step, and there is definitely literature to show that if you over dry the dentin,
you're in trouble.
The collagen, you've removed the smear layer, you've exposed the collagen, you've exposed dental tubules, and then if you dry, the collagen matrix collapses, and you have these exposed dental tubules which do not receive resin, potentially, and now we have this post-op sensitivity because the bond is not there.
It's not getting into the tubules because the collagen fell over.
Because even if you do all these other steps that you're talking about, Wes, that's all good stuff, right? You properly clean and disinfect, and even if you air abrade, okay, let's say we do everything you just said. But then there's the step of bonding. Now we're ready. We've disinfected, we've cleaned, we've done everything. Now we're ready to bond. If we total etch and we over dry, we will have postoperative sensitivity risk. And so the question is, what do we do with that information? Do we say, well, yes, that's true, and you take maybe the clinician's report approach and you say, well, let's just put Gluma on everything after we etch? That's always been Gordon Christensen's way of doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Or do we leave the prep slightly moist, which is what is recommended by most manufacturers, is not to over dry, but how much is too much? Or do we just abandon that whole process and say, let's not etch the dentin at all, except for using a self-etch with these new universal products that do have a mild self-etch as a part of their chemistry, and allow that to etch the dentin for us and not remove the smear layer. Now, if you're listening to this, if you've gotten this far, you're actually invested. You know what we're talking about. You care about this. This is everyday dentistry. This isn't some craziness. We've talked about lots of craziness over the years. This is actually affecting your everyday. If you're having post-op sensitivity, hopefully you're glued to this by now. So really, what should you do? And Blotz is saying, from what I can tell, he's saying there's enough etch in our universal adhesives, like Scotch Bond Universal, for instance, right? We're not sponsored by them, but just as an example, because most people know it. There's enough etch contained in that Scotch Bond or 3M says you can use it without etching. Okay, now if you selective etch the enamel, Blotz is saying there's enough etch in this self-etcher that you're going to get enough etch pattern that you can bond to dentin effectively. So there's two approaches to this, Wes. It's either we total etch like Jason says, but we got to get our technique perfect and not over dry. Mm-hmm. Or we're going to just etch enamel, and we're going to use these universal self-etching materials to do the rest of the work. And the question is, what should you choose? And I think, Wes, this is where we got to have Blotz on, because I feel like, from what I can tell, you've got two experts in the field both telling you that these techniques can work. You've got somebody like Smithson saying, hey, just total etch and then maybe do, 2 times of scrubbing your adhesive. Maybe, do all these other steps to make sure you've got clean enamel and clean dentin. And then he's not having problems with post-op sensitivity. And lots of people, think of how long we've been total etching dentin, have had no problems with post-op sensitivity. But then you've got this other approach. Don't etch the dentin and just rely on the self-etch of your universal adhesive, which is what I've been doing, Wes. I haven't been total etching dentin for probably, 10 years. I've been selective etching enamel when indicated. And then I've been using a 2-bottle 6th generation that has a separate self-etch step, a primer, and a separate bonding bottle. So it's a 6th generation combined with selective etching when indicated. Mm-hmm. And I also haven't been having post-op sensitivity. So you haven't been having post-op doing total etch. I haven't been having post-op sensitivity doing essentially what Blotz is talking about. But there's this other thing, Wes, this activation of these enzymes that he's talking about. Franklin Tay talked about it years ago. Does this whole MMP activation thing, does it really break down this dentin bond over time? How much does that really matter?
Yeah, what is the long-term effects, basically? The short-term might be the sensitivity, but what is the long-term effects of etching with phosphoric acid and over-drying dentin? I think the things that really are interesting is that there is no way. John, you recently talked to Greg Kinzer about this. There is no way that you can effectively eliminate touching dentin with your etch. Even if you're doing selective etch, you're going to get etch on the dentin. And even if you're really careful. It's going to be
even when you're rinsing it. Yeah, even when you're rinsing it.
Even if you're really careful. I mean, are you for sure getting all of the enamel? You know,
Right.
I mean, like, are you,
Even if you're under a scope, I mean,
yeah,
you're going to have
I mean, in the
etch
base
get
of the
on your dent.
box of a class 2 prep, are you just
Right.
putting a fine bead of etch down there because you don't want to get it on your pulpal floor or your
Right.
axial wall? I mean,
And
some
you
of
see
these
the
virgin
crystals,
preps.
enamel
I mean,
crystals. You're like, I got that one,
I
and
mean,
I got that one.
I'm using 8 power. I can see, I can place. Well, I can see the hybrid layer because I use 20X.
That's right. That's right.
No.
Yeah, I bond only under SEM. For
Yeah.
me, I bond only under SEM.
You know, I'm just sitting here, you know, thinking about all these things, and I hate confusion. And this is what's wrong right now in dentistry, is that there are too many people that are trying to create some value for their system, and we need a focus. Okay. And so what we're going to try to do in the coming months is we're going to try to get some focus here. Now, we've given you the opinions of well, John and Wes, you've heard what we're doing. I mean, I'm total etch, he's selective etching, and he's not having problems, I'm not having problems. I'm using a Scotch Bond Universal, he's using Optibond.
Kerr. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, he's using a Kerr product. Yeah. So he's using Kerr, I'm using 3M. Okay? And so, like, we're not having issues. Now we're using top branded products, people. You know? And so I'm using Ultra Etch from Ultra Dent. He's using a benzoclonium.
Etch.
Yeah,
benzalkonium chloride.
He's using benzoclonium chloride, which has a disinfectant in it. You know, etch, phosphoric acid. I've been in John's practice. I worked there for 6 months. I used his products, and I didn't have problems. Okay?
Yep.
I didn't have issues. So you know what I did, though? Is I refreshed my memory on the IFU and made sure that I was using each one appropriately. I remember talking to John about, this is going to be interesting because I'm going to get a tribenzoclonium chloride etch to see how I like it, how it plays, and all that kind of thing. I know it's good stuff. So I'm just saying, what we want to do for you, one, is provide some consensus on what to do. Hey, if you're a dental student, you probably just got to do what they're offering you in the clinic. Once you get out, you may get to make some decisions. As an associate, that's very difficult. You have to have tough conversations, but you better daggone know when you go to your boss what you're talking about. And sometimes the challenge is going to be like, I don't have problems, when you know the boss is having issues. He's just not telling you about it. Okay? In all honesty, 99% of the time, John and I are not having issues. And the sensitivity that we're having is typical issues that you would have with teeth that are doomed or have issues anyway.
Yeah,
or we have
irreversible or reversible pulpitis issues.
Those are totally different conversations.
Right. Nothing could have changed.
So what I want to do is I want to challenge Marcus to come on the show.
Yeah,
I want to hear the backstory of this article and why he's making these claims. We've known that there is some degradation to collagen for years. We've known this. Why are they making this statement right now when so many good clinicians are saying this doesn't matter, and that there really isn't a reason? Is there something else that we need to know? It's a great article. Friends have definitely reached out to me and saying, what are you doing right now? Do I need to change? And you know what I said? I said, just wait. I said, because I'm going to get to the bottom of this. John, another great show. Yeah.
I know. Hey. I mean, I think that this is what people want to know. Day-to-day dentistry. This is what we're talking about. It's at a high level, but it's day-to-day dentistry. And I think the takeaway message from today, first and foremost, is know what you're using. Know what you're using and why. Don't be the 20 out of 25 that didn't know the answer to the question. When the rep comes in and says, hey, I've got a new product, and they tell you it's a 2-bottle self-etch, you're like, 6th generation. We should be experts at this. There is no excuse. I understand if you don't know how to do veneers or hybrids because you didn't learn that in school. I understand that. But what I will never understand, and really I don't think we should accept, is not knowing how to do bonding. And not wanting to be an expert in bonding. It's every single day, and it will eliminate a lot of the problems that you have in your practice if you become an expert at this. So
Hey,
stay tuned because Blotz is coming. I guarantee you, he's going to hear
he's
this.
going to be on the show because he's been on there before.
Kinzer's
Hey,
already
listen.
pressuring him. He's already peer pressuring him. We're going to get him on. And when he's on, we're going to really get to the bottom of this. And we're going to figure out, especially about the long term. So we want you to text us, and Wes has put it up on the screen, and let us know what you're using or what you're confused about or what problems you're having, how you've solved those problems. 865-544-8954. That's 865-544-8954. Text the Dental Guys. We will mention your comments on the show if they are pertinent.
Speaking to that, let me mention this one right here. Dr. Patel, shout out to you, Dental Care of Morristown or Morrisville, North Carolina. Longtime listener, RDI grad. Okay. All right.
Love it.
So practicing, he sent me a text and he was like, "Hey, Dental Guys, love the show." He said, "Any suggestions on the best way to remove a bridge or crown without damaging it?" Oh. I've tried spring-loaded remover, a Morel crown and bridge remover. I wanted to try Richwell Sticky C&B remover, but those are currently out of stock. Any suggestions? So I sent over what I'm using, which is a pneumatic crown and bridge remover. My girls absolutely hate it when I get this thing out, but I used it even last week. And it is a great tool that I've had for 20 years, a pneumatic crown and bridge remover. It does seem archaic. I think these are worthy. You're going to spend less than $1,000. And he was actually looking at one. I looked at the one he was about to purchase, and I think it's going to be one that he likes as well. And so shout out to Dr. Patel for reaching out to us. Appreciate the comment. Hey, listen, right now we are excited about so many things coming up on the show. And if you're listening to this, we want you to like, share, and subscribe on YouTube. It really helps the algorithm. So if you're watching on YouTube, I really appreciate that. John and I really strive to get those videos out to you there, but also on Spotify and Apple Podcast. Make sure you leave us a review there. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook. We're even on X sometimes. I mean, it's still there. The Dental Guys there.
For now.
Super pumped about that. And so, hey, this has been another great show of the Dental Guys. And so, again, if you're listening to this, tell a friend, share about the show. So for John, I'm Wes, and we are the Dental Guys.